Welcome to Kigali Council on Foreign Relations. We're very excited for our event today with Ambassador of Netherlands to Rwanda. We'll jump into the conversation a few minutes from now, but just quickly to remind everybody that, the logistic of our conversation. One is we're on the record for the first 20 minutes, and then we will jump off the record when we go to questions and answer for the last part of our conversation. So people still logging in. So for those who are just joining us, keep logging in. But one thing I want to let is we'll try to take questions from the audience in the last part of our conversation. So please start sending your questions as we go through the conversation, and we'll try to take those questions. There's a lot of people for this event, so I'm hoping we'll try to take as many questions possible. If we were not able to take your question, please forgive us. We'll try to do next time. But otherwise, that's everything from my side. But Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us. So good to have you. And thank you for making time to talk to us this conversation. There's a lot of things happening from the relation between Rwanda and Netherlands, and with Netherlands also. So I'm excited to jump into the conversation. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. So
let's start a conversation a little bit on a personal note. I like to start on the personal note for conversations. What has been your journey into the foreign service? What drove you there? What passion, what desire, interested to join the foreign service? In all careers.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, it wasn't very obvious from the start. I grew up in a Dutch university, a pretty city called Delft, and there wasn't really much impetus to seek wider horizons, except maybe if I come to think of it, via my grandfather, who happened to be a captain in the Dutch Navy fleet, merchant Navy, that is. I still recall him, and he showed me pictures, and he told me stories about all his journeys to faraway places, and I guess that somehow stuck somewhere in the back of my mind. But then I studied history and commercial law, and I joined one of the larger Dutch banks at the end of the 1980s. Then, maybe 1 or 2 years later, all sorts of events started to unfold in Europe, as you know. The Berlin Wall came down. There was the public uprising against President Ceausescu in Romania. I got glued to the television together with many other people in Western Europe. And then I guess I started to ask myself, do I really want to stay in the world of finance for my entire life, or do I want to be at least part of these historic developments elsewhere in the world? And then I decided to change my career.
Interesting.
Basically, that's it.
But you also have served in interesting places, Iraq and other else.
Yeah, well, indeed, I got my fair share of historic developments. I started my career abroad in Kenya, but I also came in those days to Rwanda for our humanitarian aid effort in those days, 94, 98, as well as to Burundi. Later on, my career took me to Nicaragua, Afghanistan, and indeed Iraq, and now here. So I'm very pleased to be back here in Rwanda, because obviously I was interested in seeing how the country had progressed and how the country had developed over those last 25 years. And that has been an incredible experience, really. Yeah.
I'm interested in touching a little bit about your experience, what we have seen as transformation, but we'll talk about it later. But let's go back a little bit on the cooperation. I mean, Netherlands is very active in so many areas in Africa, in Rwanda. What's your country strategy in Rwanda and Africa, and what's the cooperation or the partnership between the Netherlands, Rwanda, and Africa like today?
Okay. Well, obviously, Africa is a huge and very diverse continent, and maybe one could say it would be a little bit presumptuous to say that the Netherlands, being a fairly small nation, would have an all-encompassing strategy for the entire continent. But having said that, obviously, it's a very important continent for us in Europe and for us in the Netherlands as well. its close proximity to the EU, its very young population, and all sorts of global issues at play there. How countries in Africa will be affected by climate change, migration, security issues, and obviously lately the COVID pandemic. And it's clear to us that there are no quick answers to this. No country can resolve that by itself. We are in this together, and we need to address this together. So if you may want to speak about our strategy, it's thematic driven around a couple of axes, like peace, security and stability, sustainable development, which usually translates into water, food security and climate assisted programs, as well as sustainable trade and investment. And where we apply these three themes, as well as this overarching theme, which we always have because it's in our constitution, and that is promotion of the international legal order and human rights. That depends really on the situation. And Rwanda actually is an interesting case in this, because we didn't have an embassy here until 2005, when the first embassy office opened in Kigali. And that was all defined at that moment by humanitarian assistance for all the obvious reasons. And that graduated into a fully fledged development cooperation program around three themes. And now we are transitioning to that third phase. That is also the ambition of Rwanda, to see improve the trade and investment relationships. My point is that this relationship keeps changing, and we want to be responsive to the challenges that present itself at a certain moment in time in a certain country, and be able to adapt that when circumstances change again.
So I mean, you just answered my next question, but to just get it clearly, so the process of scaling down development relationship in a number of countries, including Ghana and Rwanda, is basically to move the relationship to the next level, which is trade and relationship. Is this what you're saying?
In 2018, our new minister presented a policy paper to our parliament, and that said that we will focus more on those countries where indeed at this moment the conflict and stability are the main issues. And that happened to be often countries in North Africa, Sahel, the Horn of Africa, as well as in the Near East. At the same time, and that's also part of the very same policy paper, it really stresses the importance of increasing our economic trade and investment ties, and partnering with private sector to tackle development-related issues. We want to see sustainable economic growth and development, which is also equitable for the population. So the changes which we are going through now here in Rwanda are a result of that paper. Although I must add that first discussions on this already took place, I think, starting from 2013. So that's 8 years ago. And we have taken our time. We do this gradually. We don't just stop from one moment to another and try another game. No, it's a general gradual transition. And I would like to add that in transitioning to trade and investment, it doesn't necessarily mean that we don't have any ODA-defined instruments available anymore, because there are still many constraints in the economy, especially where you speak about certain change of added value. You're really talking about, for instance, how does a farmer get its produce to a national market, a regional market, and maybe an international market? And you run into all sorts of difficulties, like cold storage, like transport, logistics, water, and we will still have the instruments to address those constraints, and we use them, also here in Rwanda. Yeah.
I want to come back to the other areas you're working in, trade and economy specifically, because I think it's a very interesting topic. But just a little bit in terms of your cooperation in Rwanda. I know you're celebrating 25 years of your partnership in the justice sector in Rwanda. Could you talk a little bit of what does that mean? And what are you doing? Do you have celebration? Do you have something going on in that area?
Well, it's part of this transitioning. It is indeed this week that we organized together with the Ministry of Justice this conference of 25 years of Rwanda, Netherlands cooperation in the justice sector. And that started 25 years ago in a very incremental way. Our then Minister for Development Cooperation, who was very committed to the Great Lakes region in general and to Rwanda in particular, Mr. Yannick. He did something which in those days was rather revolutionary, I would say. He funded the construction of a new prison. Why? Because Rwanda had deliberately chosen this path, that justice needed to be done. Revenge was not an option, and of course there were many people behind the prison gates. So there was a lot of overcrowding, and this new prison symbolized a new beginning. And from that point, it branched out into well, basically all aspects of the justice sector. We are still involved with the Rwanda Correctional Services on the prisons. Only earlier this year, I had the privilege to launch together with the Ministry of Justice what I feel is a really wonderful program on vocational training within the prison. So those inmates who are nearly approaching the end of their term, they get to know a job. A job as a mechanic, a job as a mason or beautician. And that prepares people for their life in society again, become responsible members of society. It's their choice, but you need to give them the tools. I think that's a wonderful example from work we still do. Then we are actively involved in access to justice. So yeah, it's very well to build new courthouses and train lawyers, which we've also done. But at the end of the day, who is the client? It's the citizen. And the citizen needs to have access to all those legal services to resolve his or hers legal issues within the context of the law. So we have worked together with Rwandan civil society organizations, amongst others, to build up a network of legal services that actually reduce the barriers for ordinary citizens to access their rights. And they have very innovative, and that I really like about working here in Rwanda, they have very innovative approaches like this call line. People can call a number and then get online advice or via the phone or even by SMS. It's great. And then, of course, there is this long tradition which we have built over 25 years of training of lawyers and judges. And I was so much impressed to see that these very personal bonds, this very human touch to it, has become so important. So many Rwandan lawyers do have some relationship to the Netherlands, and to be honest, I'm really proud of that. And mind you, these were very young people at that moment. They got trained, they got the skills developed, and yeah, they built the network and they built the environment which we see now.
It's very interesting that your work in the justice sector. So touching a little bit on economy and trade. If I'm not wrong, I think a Dutch company is one of the largest taxpayer in Rwanda, Yannick, which is on Bralirwa. But talk a little bit about the economy and the trade relation between both countries, and what kind of private sector companies from the Netherlands we have in Rwanda.
Well, you already mentioned the biggest one, obviously, who has been operational in Rwanda, I think, since 1956, so really very long time. But apart from that, there are other companies, also bigger companies, who have a substantial track record here. Not least amongst them is the DSM health and life sciences company from the Netherlands, that together with the government and together with WFP, to name a few of their partners, have built a factory for the production of porridge and baby foods based on locally sourced maize. And that serves various purposes. First of all, you'll find very many happy farmers who know that they can sell their produce to a reputable company. And then there are, of course, the young children in Rwanda who have access to high quality baby food. So it's a win-win situation on many sides. However, and that's interesting, we ran into some difficulties, or at least DSM ran into some difficulties. It's a technical question, but we were able to help them with finding an answer to it as an embassy. And it took too long for the maize, for the corn, to arrive from farmer to factory. It took about, I think, about 3 weeks or so. And during those 3 weeks, a lot happened to the harvest, and it started to deteriorate. And obviously, you can't use it anymore for production of something as sensitive as baby food, which needs to be of the highest quality standards. And they come up with an idea to reduce that time span to only 1 or 2 days, and they've done so in a really short period. And they've funded this partly, but we have taken the other half through the Netherlands Enterprise Agency in The Hague. And that's the way how you can cooperate with private sector. I think it's a wonderful example, but excellent results you can get. Probably having even more impact than doing everything yourself as a government. You need to unlock this expertise of the private sector.
So I want to ask the last question before I open up for the audience. Just one, I mean, COVID is devastating communities around the world, and we're seeing a lot of impact on many countries around the world. What lesson can we learn from this crisis, this COVID, from your point of view?
What we can learn from this crisis? Well, first of all, that such crises can present themselves in no time, I guess. I recall being in our ambassadors conference last year, which is always at the end of January, and then there were some stories coming about there's some disease somewhere in Asia, very strange. And well, 5-6 weeks later, I think we went into the first lockdown in the Netherlands, but also here in Rwanda. So things can change really rapidly. And once again, you can't get out of it only on your own. Of course, at the local level, governments can take, as we have seen here and elsewhere, certain measures to mitigate and to try to suppress this. But long-term solutions need international cooperation. And that's true for the EU, which in its procurement policy for vaccines had decided to join forces to prevent competition between the various member states. But also the EU itself stresses that on a global level you need to seek that cooperation, and that's why of just about all the vaccines produced in the EU, 50% are exported to, I understand, more than 90 different countries. So you need to really work together. Unfortunately, the recent Rome summit on global health, I think it was two weeks ago, gave some really promising indications of the direction. That is, in terms of the production, regionalize the production, ensure access to vaccine production, and share whatever you have as a surplus.
Yeah, excellent. So, if I'm not wrong, you're 1.5 years or 2 years into your time already. So, just a little bit, love to hear what's your priority for the rest of the time as an ambassador to Rwanda?
I was requested when I came here 1.5 years ago to do two things. First of all, to implement the policy change which we have discussed earlier, and do this in a reasonable and consulted way. Well, that was one of the reasons we had organized this Justice Seminar earlier this week. And also, to see to it that the embassy transitions from this aid to this trade and investment mode. So that requires part of my my effort internally, as we are transitioning ourselves in terms of our thinking and our capacity. And then, of course, that needs to translate itself into improved relations and to improve knowledge about our private sector, where the bottlenecks are, where we can be of assistance, and we can do a lot of things. It's not just trade promotion, which is obviously part of it, but also focusing on those bottlenecks which I tried to describe earlier on, and see to them that they disappear.
I mean, I'm very interested in the private sector being part of foreign policy and international development. So it's good to see the research moving to that stage. So my last question from me, I love to ask this question: what's the best thing for you living in Rwanda?
Well, unlike my previous posting, I'm able to walk here in the street. So I've taken up running again in the streets, and I have joined a group of mountain bike enthusiasts, which is a mixed group, about half Rwandan, half foreigners, who every week join and then take a wonderful ride over in the countryside just outside of
that's amazing. So you're one of those people who on bicycle going to Musanze, and I'm always asking, how can you climb those mountains on a bicycle?
Yeah, it's a good question. Occasionally, I ask myself, why am I doing this? But
yeah, I have a friend who does that. It's interesting. Anyway, Ambassador, wonderful. So we've got we'll take questions from the audience, and we'll go off the record. Please, Estelle, please send us questions from the audience. Thank you very much. I will go back on the record. Very fantastic, interesting questions. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your time.